Hello everybody, this is Gregory with 5-Minute Catholic Apologetics and Living, where 5 minutes of your time may get you to the divine. Today we're going to talk about the mission system that you found in the Americas, whether it be down in South America or the missions that you find in Mexico and present day the United States. And I'm going to give a Catholic perspective of these things as they've been attacked by the secularists recently. Now before we begin, let's start with a prayer. In nomine Patris et Filii et Spiritui Sancti. Amen. Gloria Patri Filio et Spiritui Sancto, sicut erat in principio, et nunc et semper, et saecula saeculorum. Amen. So, you've seen the last 20 years, there's been an attack on, frankly, anything that's perceived to be colonialism, anything that is perceived to be from the West, affecting indigenous cultures around the world. You've seen there to be an attack on the mission system, as we call it over here in the United States. And I want to do an episode on this because I live near a lot of missions. So I live close to San Antonio, Texas, and San Antonio was originally a missionary. Think of the Alamo. The Alamo was a fort that protected the missions. And so there's 5 missions in the San Antonio area. If you look at Junipero Cerro, Saint Cerro over in California, he established 20-something missions over there in Alto, California, in present-day American California. But in Baja California, there were a lot of missions over there. Then you look at the Jesuits with the Reducciones over in Paraguay and in that area, Uruguay, Brazil. They established tons in the 18th century, and the list goes on and on. And you've seen this kind of with the presaging of Indigenous Peoples Day instead of Columbus, because we can't celebrate Western civilization coming to the West. And why can't we do that? Because of the noble savage trope, right? And the noble savage trope, which you can't actually see an interesting spin on it in Frozen 2, the sequel, is white man bad, white man didn't contribute anything good, Western civilization, but the noble savage, the indigenous people are good and they never did anything bad, which is absolutely not true. If you look at the Aztecs, they were committing human sacrifices, child sacrifices, they were doing horrifically bad things. And if you look at the history of the indigenous people, they were fighting each other and killing each other and torturing each other. And it's human nature. It's the fall of Adam and Eve. We have this pristine indigenous people and these evil Westerners. No, it's not like that. But you've seen this kind of current the last 20 years. And so for those of you who don't live near missions or don't know the mission history, I want to do a quick video on it because you've seen this kind of view of missions were bad. They were just a place where priests could sexually predate indigenous people and use their labor and all these things. And is it to say that that never happened? Of course, I'm not going to say never happened, but that was not the intention of the missions. Just like you see, well, Christopher Columbus was a genocidal killer. No, he wasn't. He brought disease, yes. He also brought priests. His tension and the intention of the crown of both Portugal and Spain was to, yes, find new worlds, but to baptize these people in an earnest attempt, not proselytization where they go to an area and like, all of you must be baptized, we're going to kill you. Were there conquistadors that did that for certain areas? Yes. Did they do that with the approval of the church? Absolutely not. Absolutely not. How many times do we see nominal Catholics ignoring what the church teaches about a given thing? All the time. For example, we had an episode here on slavery. The church had announced prior to Columbus, as Portugal was going down the African coast, that slavery is wrong. We shouldn't enslave people. Did Catholics, in addition to English people, Dutch people, and everything, enslave? Yes, absolutely. So, I mean, look at today with abortion. How many times do people, Catholics, don't believe in the church's teaching on abortion or contraception? So it's been since the beginning of time where you see Catholics ignoring what the church teaches, going back to Judas. But either way, the mission system was a way to had multiple purposes. So a typical mission would have walls, it would have a church, it would have like a granary, it would have lodging for some soldiers and for the indigenous people. They were normally located close to a fort. That way there was soldiers nearby, and the soldiers, of course, were there to help thwart off any indigenous attacks from like raiders. Like here in Texas, it'd be like the Comanches, very savage. And so the job of the missions was multifold. It was to bring the faith and, yes, to baptize the indigenous, because we're trying to save their souls from their heathen religions that they believed in. It was also to teach them trades and skills, how to farm, how to ranch. We taught them basic education, from a la 18th century style education, but they were there, the priests were there, whether they be Franciscans or Jesuits or whatever, to educate the children, to educate the women, to educate the men, and to educate them all in the Catholic faith. These were all noble intentions. That was the whole reason of the mission system. So on a given day in a mission, and you go to Mission San Jose in San Antonio, which is probably the best preserved one, has all the walls still, and they'll have lecture series there, and you can do tours. So on a given day, they'd be out in the fields, the indigenous people would be out in the fields harvesting and whatnot, and they would live out there. But if there was ever a Comanche raid, they would all get into Mission San Jose because it had the walled forts, and they would be protected there. And then of course they would go to daily mass, they would go to Sunday mass. Then most of these had some sort of convent for the nuns, and it was like an intact system. And so the goal of the Spanish crown was, yes, was there like a financial benefit to this? Sure. If you're making these people and teaching them how to civilize, you're civilizing them, teaching how to ranch and how to farm, yes, it's going to benefit the crown to bring these people into the orbit of Western civilization, whether it be the Spanish doing this in Texas, California, whatnot, or the English were doing this in the New World and in India, for example, and all through Africa. It was the same thing. It was almost this noblesse oblige, like, oh, we know better, we're Western white man, and we want to bring civilization to these places. And I think what you see with the decolonization effort and the anti-colonization effort the last 40, 50 years, it's always, the intellectual radical left, the intelligentsia, are always isolating certain things. Well, you see the Western white people, and normally it's going to be the church people. Well, they raped this woman, or they hurt this man, and again, Christ talks about it. You see in Luke with the wheat and the tares, and the fish and the net. Christ will separate the good from the bad at our death. There's always going to be bad amongst the good, always. And so you're always going to find cases in the mission system of there were abuses, for sure. But overall, the mission system was good. It was good for Indians. It gave them a skill. It gave them literacy. It gave them the faith. So overall, it was a good thing. You just don't hear about this a lot. So like with all things, you have to understand that there was much, 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 much more good that came out of the mission system than there was bad. And normally when the mission systems were destroyed, like you see like in Paraguay with the Jesuits, it was not good for the indigenous people, because the indigenous people then were predated or victimized by the big layer, like the commercial farmers, the commercial ranchers, who just used them for slave labor. They didn't care about educating them. They didn't care about their souls. They just used them as human peonage, as slavery. And you saw this played out everywhere once the Franciscans and the Jesuits were kicked out. So in whole, the mission system was a good thing. Guys, post in the comments. I'd love to hear from you. Until next time, take care. God bless and pray.